Welcome. Uh, Thank you for joining us today. Today is our sixth and final webinar in our 2020 series, The Nuts and Bolts of Evaluation for Community Organizations, and presented to you by the Program Evaluation Group at the University of Michigan School of Social Work, also known as PEG. Today's webinar topic is Data Visualization Basics, and our presenter is PEG staff evaluator Kate Helegda. We have an action-packed agenda for you today with lots of data viz information, so buckle up, but remember that you will be able to access the slides as well as the recording of today's session on the PEG website, and we'll put a link in the chat for you on that. I'm Lisa Greco, manager for the Program Evaluation Group, and many of you have been with us for a previous webinar, so I will keep the housekeeping items very brief. Your microphones are muted and cameras are off. You have live transcription available to you at the bottom of your screen. You can select whether or not you would like to see subtitles. We invite you to ask any questions through the Q&A, and we're gonna have our staff team and our students monitoring and curating the Q&A as well as the chat. Use the chat box to share any reactions or comments. And as I said earlier, the recording as well as the slides will be available later. Probably early next week, you can hop onto our website and you'll find that information there. If you're here seeking continuing education credit, we're happy to see you. And on behalf of Continuing Ed, these are the expectations that you stay for the duration of the session today. We're gonna make sure that we are keeping you engaged, and we'll need you to demonstrate your engagement for the CEs by responding to the polls and perhaps any chat invitations for information that we invite you to share with us. And then within a couple of business days after the end of our session today, you will receive an evaluation through email from the Continuing Ed office at the School of Social Work, and you need to complete that evaluation, and then the CE department will get your Continuing Ed unit documentation out to you. So as I said, this is a look at our team, and Kate Helegda is our presenter for today, one of our staff evaluators, and the rest of our team is pictured here, as well as graduate students. And as I said, we'll be on the chat and in the Q&A connecting with you while we move through today's presentation. Again, we thank you so much for being here, and we're happy to connect with you again today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter, Kate Helegda.
Thanks, Lisa. We wanted to start by reading our land acknowledgement for the University of Michigan School of Social Work. So we acknowledge that the University of Michigan, named for Michigami, the world's largest freshwater system and located in the Huron River watershed, was formed and has grown through connections with the land stewarded by the Niswe, Ishkotawan, and Anishinaabeg, the Three Fires people, who are the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi, along with their neighbors, the Seneca, Delaware, Shawnee, and Wyandot nations. So as Lisa said, this is our sixth and final webinar in our Nuts and Bolts of Evaluation series. We've been going since June, so if you've been here the whole time, thanks. If you're new, welcome. You can review any past webinars on our website there. We can put the link in the chat box for you as well, so you can get there easily. But this is our last webinar for the time being in our Nuts and Bolts series. So today, as Lisa said, we're going to be going over data visualization. And so our agenda for today, we already did our introductions. We're going to talk about why we visualize. We're going to go over some data visualization basics. We're going to talk a little bit about choosing the right chart. We're going to continue our Skillshare from the last webinar where we looked at some pivot tables, and we're going to do pivot charts. And then we will hopefully have some time for question and answers at the end. Before we dive into the content here, we do want to know a little bit about you. And so if you can respond to the poll here of where do you live in whatever region that you're in Michigan. If you don't live in Michigan, no worries. Feel free to just type in the chat box of where you're from so that we know where you're at. And I know we've had some people from all over the US in our past webinars, which is so exciting that you're tuning into us here at the University of Michigan. All right. So it looks like majority of folks are in Region 9 and Region 10. So looking like, the Metro Detroit area. Any interesting chat box locations?
Texas and California.
All right, welcome. Our next poll here is just tell us what sector best describes your affiliation. So we just want to know a little bit more about who's tuning in. Are you in business, community development? Are you a community member, criminal justice, education, evaluation, government, healthcare, human services? If you're none of the above, feel free to write in the chat box where you work. All right, looks like we have quite a few from healthcare, some education, community development. Any interesting chat box?
We have one person from AmeriCorps and a student in program evaluation.
All right.
Someone from Michigan Immigrants' Rights Center.
Well, welcome. All right, so our next poll here before we dive in is just, what is your experience level with data visualization? Do you consider yourself a novice, a beginner, proficient, or expert? And all are welcome here. So the content today, we're going to be more in the novice beginner area. And then if you are more expert or proficient or even competent and you want to add anything to our comments, feel free to join in a chat box. It looks like most folks are beginners. We have a couple novices and then we have an expert here. So definitely feel free to add in anything you want to add in addition to the chat box and share your knowledge. All right, so diving in now. So what is data visualization? It's really kind of what it sounds like. It's the representation of data in a visual format. And so it's just a way that we can take a lot of information and data and turn it into something that's easily interpretable. And it really takes the data that we have and it helps us make meaning and communicate the purpose of that data. So some reasons why we visualize data. Humans are highly visual learners. So we're always skimming for things that really pop out to us and jump out to us. And a lot of the times those are the charts and the graphs that are in the information that we have. Data, there's been studies that's shown that data is more persuasive if it's shown visually. Looking at data in a visual way allows us to see trends, patterns, and relationships. And there's also been studies that show that if you're given information and you're also given it in a visual way with your data visualization, it adds some legitimacy and credibility to that information. And so I have an example here of a visual that you've probably seen a lot over the past year, our delightful 2020 year in our coronavirus cases. So I just pulled this from Johns Hopkins University, and it's a confirmed coronavirus cases in Michigan graph. And so we can see here, when, we can just pull out a lot of information that we may not be able to pull out if we were just given a list of numbers. So we see here, when did coronavirus come into Michigan? We can see kind of around end of March, early April. We see a big jump in end of November. So you can just pull a lot of information from this one picture here. When it comes to how to actually visualize your data, there's a ton of software out there that you can use. Some popular ones are Tableau for dashboarding, or there's GIS for mapping. Power BI is a Microsoft add-on that you can use that interacts with the different Microsoft suite. And so if you have something really specific that you want to do with your data and you have a specific vision, there's probably going to be a software that's best for you out there. So do a Google search, look for things. There's just so many different options. But for today and in this webinar, we're just going to talk about Microsoft Excel. So Excel, it's something that's widely used and widely available. It's compatible with our Microsoft products. There are a ton of built-in tools in there that you can use to visualize your data. There's also tutorials that are widely available, doing like look on YouTube or just Google some things. And it's simple and powerful. Some of the disadvantages with using Excel for visualizing data is that you have to manually build your visualizations. In some of the different softwares, you can enter your data and then it just starts, spitting things out for you and setting things up already, where with Excel, you're going to have to go in and, actually lay out what you want to do with your data. And then some visualizations do require a bit of a more advanced Excel skill set. We're not going to be going into that today, but if you want to do some different things, you may need to learn some other stuff in Excel. So in this webinar today, we're just going to cover some basic data visualization principles, do some simple charts and graphs. We're not going to be doing anything too advanced. We're not going to be doing anything with mapping, although we do have some examples with maps. I'm not going to be going into every single chart and graph that Excel offers. We're only going to be going into a few. And we're not, for the most part, going to be talking about qualitative data. So this is going to be mostly quantitative data. All right. So to begin with, boom. So look at all of this. What jumps out to you? I know for me, it's the color. So there's a few discrepancies in here. So things that are different. There's one that's a shape. So we see a hexagon, and there's one that's a size, and that's on the second to last row. There's a circle that's a little bit smaller. But I know when I look at this, the thing that keeps popping out is that yellow dot. So when you're doing data visualization, color is by far the most powerful quality when it comes to noticeability through contrast. And so when you're choosing colors for your data visualizations, a few things to think about is you can do monochromatic colors, or you could use a bunch of different colors. Some things, so monochromatic is just using one color and then multiple shades. Using this, it provides a sense of cohesion. You don't really have to worry about matching in this case. One of the downsides is that it is lacking in contrast, and the human eye can really only process about 4 shades. So if you look at these 2 images below, the first one's pretty distinguishable, but then when we have 6, the darker colors kind of look the same. It's hard to tell the difference between the 2. So if you're using this, you may only want to use 4 different shades. If you're going to be using color, contrasting colors are really great for calling attention to what you want to call attention to. Colors close to each other on the color wheel will provide a sense of harmony, but be careful because too many colors can be hard for the eye to really distinguish. And so some general color conventions to remember are that darker colors mean more. If you look at the map on the right side of the screen, we can see here where those darker, more saturated reds are. We just automatically, our brains pick that up as denser and more. And so it just kind of how we read things, darker means more. If you're doing something, you can use intuitive colors. So the pie chart on the left here, we have the Earth's surface, and we use blue for sea and green for land, just so that it helps us kind of further comprehend that. And then warm colors advance, cool colors recede. So if you're trying to have something really pop out, use a warm color because that's going to stand out to folks looking at that. Something to consider with colors when it comes to equity is color blindness. So color blindness is very common, 1 in 12 men, 1 in 200 women, and the majority of folks who have color blindness have red-green color blindness. So some things to think about when you're using color is to just be very careful with your reds and your greens. There's this really awesome resource called the Color Blindness Simulator that you can use, and you can enter any of your graphs or charts into that and then see how it looks with different variations of color blindness if you're want to make sure that your graph is accessible. And then you can also just look up some color blindness accessible color palettes. So there's tons online. I just found this one from Vengate on a blog, and then it'll just provide you some palettes that you can use that are great for being able to distinguish. Some other things that help with color blindness is to use highly contrasting colors. You can also use patterns or textures. And then monochromatic colors are great too because shading is able to be distinguished more often. All right, so organizing your data. So there's a lot of different things you can think of when organizing your data. Sorting your data. So you want to sort your data in ways that makes it more easily interpretable. So if you look at the chart on the right, if we're looking at what pets people have, let's say we're looking at cats, birds, and dogs. On the chart on the left, the data is not organized by the quantity, but then the chart on the right is. So it's just easier to see, okay, the most pets people have are dogs, and it's easier for you to interpret that chart. You want time to move from left to right. If you look at the charts below, we have two line charts, and the one on the left, time is moving 2020 to 2019. And so if we look at that line, our brain registers that as increasing. But then when we look at the chart on the right, we see from 2019 to 2020, that number decreased. So we just want to make sure that we're doing things in a way that's easy to interpret. So time moving from left to right. If you have scales, if you're providing some survey data, keep your scales in scale order, and then just align your text so that it's easier to read and everything is on the same line. Labeling data. So this is something where a lot of times what we're taught is very different from data visualization principles. So in school, oftentimes we're taught you have to label everything, label your x-axis, your y-axis, everything has to have a label. But that's not always the case when it comes to doing the best data visualization. So some things to remember are to use unambiguous dates. So if we just have a 01/02, this can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So it could mean January 2nd, maybe if you're not from the US, it could mean February 1st, or maybe you think that it could mean January 2002. So just be really clear when you're labeling dates that you have unambiguous dates. If you're using percentage for parts of a whole, that percentage should only add up to 100. It may be different if you're doing something with growth, but for the most part, percentages only go up to 100. You don't always need decimals if it doesn't add anything or if things aren't super distinguishable using decimals. So you can decide if you need to use decimals. Not just makes the numbers a little bit easier to read. For titling your you should just title it so that the most important information is called out. So if we look at that second graph there, we see that the title says, overall, adults in the senior living facility enjoy their life more in 2019 than they did in 2018. So rather than saying overall satisfaction with life, we actually say what we want to say with that information. Usually when you make a visualization in Excel, it starts by having these grid lines in the chart, but you don't actually need grid lines. Sometimes it makes it harder to read, and so we'll go into that a little later. And then you don't always need labels. So the pie chart on the bottom, we're only calling attention to the 64% of folks who enjoy their life overall. So the other folks who don't enjoy their life overall in that grayed out section of the pie chart, we're not even labeling that because it's not what we're focused on. Some other things just to remember when you're creating data visualizations is we're really good at determining color. So using color to make things stand out, to show differences, and then also length. So things like a bar chart, we're pretty good at saying, okay, this one's longer than this one. Some of the things that we're not great at figuring out are angles and curvature, which is why sometimes folks stay away from using pie charts just because they do use angles. And then volume and 3D. So you don't have to make anything 3D. It's just really hard for us to be able to see what those what that means. And then area. So it's hard for us to determine what's the bigger area just by looking at it. So things like bubble charts can sometimes be a little difficult to pull meaning from. Some equity considerations with data visualizations are visual impairments, neurodiversity, so things like ADHD and autism, and then dyslexia, which causes some difficulty with reading. So some ways to make your visualizations more equitable for folks are to have some large legible fonts, strong contrasting colors, lighter color for background, darker color for text, and then so avoiding pattern backgrounds, which it can be a little contrasting with things like color blindness, where sometimes pattern is good, but you really just have to determine what's best for the audience that you're presenting to. using icons, avoiding walls of text, again, large fonts, using sans serif fonts. I'll show you some examples in the next slide. Double spacing between words, avoiding italics, avoiding asymmetry, reading from left to right, and then having a simple layout. And so just an example of what the difference between sans serif fonts and serif fonts are. Serif fonts are ones with embellishments on the ends of the lines. So things like Times New Roman actually, has those lines on it. So just consider using like Arial, Calibri, those fonts. So we're gonna take a quick pause for the cause here and just do a pulse check on how are you feeling. So how are we doing right now? Are we confused, overwhelmed, relaxed, engaged, excited? Where are we at? I know we have a lot of information, so going quick. All right, looks like most folks are relaxed and engaged. We got someone excited. All right, awesome. And if you have any questions, feel free to type those into the chat box or the Q&A, and we can help get you the answers that you need. All right. So choosing the right visual. So it can be sometimes hard because there's not an exact, like, if you have this, do this. There's some basic ways that you can think about your data and the visuals, but really the right visual is the one that tells the story that you want to tell, is the easiest to interpret, and provides accurate interpretations. So you could have a really awesome visual, but if someone looks at it and they aren't sure what information they're supposed to pull from it, and then if different people look at it and they're pulling different information, then it's not the right visual. Even though it may look really cool, it's just not the one that you want to use. So when you're thinking of which visual you want to use, there are tons of things online that you can find, chart choosers. So I just have a couple examples. There's so many more online. The one on the left is from Andrew Abila, and the website's below. The one on the right is from Stephanie Evergreen, who's a data visualization expert. She has a great blog too to check out. But these types of things can help you just kind of narrow down what you might want to look for with the data that you have. So we're gonna look at a couple different options. So we're not gonna go into all of them, but just show a couple examples. So we have a couple stories here that you may want to tell with your data. So we have this one thing is very important. We really drive this one thing home. We have these two things are different or the same. So if we want to compare things, if we want to show something is related, or maybe we just want to show some results from our survey. So really, stories that you tell with your data, you can inform, you can compare, show change, show relationships. There's a lot of different stories that you may want to tell with your data. All right, so we have the story where we want to show one thing. So this one thing is very important. So let's say the story we want to tell is, do adults living at the senior living facility enjoy their life overall? And so there are a few ways that we can show this data. The first one is just having a big number with, big bolded number, 64% enjoy their life overall. And so this is, it's very simple, but it really drives the point home. You can do a bar chart, so comparing who enjoy their life, who don't enjoy their life. The title there is 64% enjoy their life overall. And then you could even do a pie chart, so 64% enjoy their life overall. So there are just tons of different options that you can do that really just drive one point home. If you want to show that two things are different or the same, so here we have the question, are adults in the senior living facility enjoying their life overall more or less than last year? And so we see here we can compare the 2 years using a bar chart, or we can do a line chart here. So for this, the 2018, 2019, it's only 1 year to show the change there. So it may be a little bit more powerful if you have more years, but you can still see an increase there using that chart. If we want to show that some things are related, you don't always have to use a chart. You can draw something out as well. So if we have this question, what are some other positives seniors have when they participate in more activities? And we look at our data, we can just show something here of folks participate in more activities. we see that the quality of life is higher, they look forward to things more, and they enjoy life more overall. So there's not actually any numbers here. We're just drawing out some of that information, which is a totally acceptable way to visualize your data. And then if we want to show the results from a survey, there are a few different options there based on what story you want to tell. So if you want to show everything that you collected from a survey, so we have here the quality of life as a whole, you can show what everybody responded to using a bar chart or a stacked bar chart up to 100%. Or if you just want to showcase, again, like if you're just trying to drive home one point from a survey or the most important information, you can just pull that out. You don't have to show everything. So again, if you, with some of our information, you can just do that big number, 64% enjoy their life overall. So you just have to decide what's important for the story that you're trying to tell with your data. All right, so let's look at some different data visualizations. And we have what we like to call our oh no-nos, which are please don't do this. This is not a great visualization. And then we also have our good to goes. And so these are the ones where it really lets you see the point, see the story, and you can really understand what's going on with that data. So the first one, we have this pie chart. And this is an oh no no. Why is this an oh no no? Because a pie chart should represent parts of a whole. And in this visualization, we're looking at overall adults in the senior living facility enjoy their life more in 2019 than they did in 2018. So that's a great title, but this chart doesn't show us that. So we're looking at parts of a whole, but we have 99%, 64%, so is the whole 163%. Like it just doesn't make any sense to have a pie chart here. These are not two parts of a whole. So an even worse oh no no for that, which kind of showcases that we just looking at things with 3D and angles is just really hard for us to even see. It just makes it even harder to look at this. Still, this pie chart should represent parts of a whole. It doesn't, and then it just makes it even worse. So just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. We don't need to do this in 3D at all. So how do we fix it? Here we go. This is a good to go. So overall, adults in the senior living facility enjoy their life more in 2019 than they did in 2018. We have our time moving from left to right, 2018, 2019. It's easy to compare the two numbers. This looks great. Here is our next oh no no. So we want to look at the number of activities that seniors are participating in. And so someone is me, but they tried to do it in a way that is sorted. So, the least number of least people participating in activities to the most, but this is just a really confusing graph because the numbers at the bottom are out of alignment. So we see 8 activities, 5 activities, 9, and it's just really hard to follow along here. And then also we have 2 sets of numbers on each axis. So it's even like, is it seniors at the bottom? Is it activities? It's just really hard to interpret this. So here's a little bit better. So here we labeled our axes. We have seniors on the y-axis, activities on the x-axis, and then we sorted our so that it's number of activities 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's just easier to see a little bit, but I put this in yellow because it's still not the greatest. Like, what are we trying to say with this information? And so if we drill down a little bit more into what we're trying to look at with this data, we may want to make this a binary variable because we just want to see like, what is the, are seniors participating in 1 to 4 activities or more than 4? So we split that up into 63% of seniors are participating in 1 to 4 activities. So it just kind of drills down the information a little bit more and it's easier for us to understand it. Maybe we just want to show the average number of activities that seniors participate in. So we just have a big 4 there, 4 average number of activities seniors participate in. Or, maybe you just want to see like, what's the most activities that seniors participate in? So we have another story we could tell here with a a 9. So the most activities any senior participates in is 9. So really just drilling down into what you want to show. If you do want to show the whole numbers that folks are participating in, you can definitely have something like this. But if you're really trying to think about what is the story you're trying to tell, information you're trying to share, down a little bit more and getting a little bit more clear is helpful. All right, so the next one. So we have what activities seniors are interested in. And so for this, I put a yellow because it's not necessarily the worst graph you can have, but it does take a bit of effort to pull some meaning from this data. So we're looking at, okay, we see activities at the bottom and how many folks are interested in these activities, but to really look at like what is the most and the least, it's just pretty difficult to actually pull that information easily. It takes a minute to get some meaning from that. But it's not terrible. So if we look, it's in alphabetical order. So it's probably just, someone took the survey and put it in a graph and then left it there. But this is much easier to interpret. So here we have, we removed the y-axis, we added some data labels. So you can see here, we added color so that it makes it easier to see what were the top 3. We sorted it from least interested to most interested. So it's just really easy to see here. Okay, so activities, not so much interested in birding. Let's not add that, but folks are really interested in doing some walking, some reading, and some swimming. We should add those activities. So it's just pulling that information from this visualization is way simpler than pulling it from this. So this is another oh no. We have one good thing with this is the title. So we're trying, 74% of residents identify as female. That's a great title. I understand what the story you're trying to tell, but the graph here, not so great. So we have a very cluttered y-axis. We really never need this many labels on our y-axis. You can, if you want to have some labels, you can do like 100%, 50%, 0%. So just, or you can even do it in quarters. So 100, 75, 50, 25, but you really never need it at this level. And then a line graph should be comparing related values. And so this is just not an appropriate graph to have a line graph for. All right, here's our good to go version of that. So if we want to show 74% of residents identify as female, this is much better. So we have color to draw attention to the story that we're trying to tell. We have our data labeled. We grayed out the areas that we're not so focused on. We sorted our data highest to lowest. It's just easy to pull meaning from this graph. So next, I like to call this my piece de resistance of terrible graphs. And so this is the worst oh no. And basically everything wrong in a graph is in this graph. There is just so much going on here. The font, like what is that font? Can't even read it. It's a very cursive-y font. The percentages, it's going up to 120%. We don't ever need it to go up to 120% if we're showing these parts of a whole. The data is labeled as a decimal, so someone didn't create that data into a percentage. The colors is 3D. It's the time is moving from right to left. It's just basically anything you can think of that's wrong with the graph is this one. So the grid lines are really thick and hard to read. It's just so much going on here. This is a, oh no. So here is a much easier way to show that data. Overall, adults living in a senior living facility enjoyed their life more. Time moves from left to right. It's simple, it's easy to read. Yeah, maybe it's not the coolest data visualization, but you can pull meaning from this. You can really see what you're trying to drive home here. Some ways that data visualization can mislead. So manipulating the y-axis. So we have 2 graphs here on the right, and it's the same data, but we just changed that y-axis. So we have different poverty rates, and the graph on the left, everything looks pretty equal. So we see, from Mississippi to Kentucky, there's a little bit less in Kentucky. But then if we look on the graph on the right, that y-axis is really manipulated So when we look at it, it does look like Kentucky doesn't have a lot of poverty, and then the other states are really, have really high poverty rates. And so just depending on how you have that y-axis, you can really manipulate what someone pulls that meaning from. So there's other ways that it can mislead, like cherry picking data. So just deciding to eliminate some things, put some things in there, using the wrong graph, going against some of those popular conventions as well. So this is a way that, I see this represented quite a bit lately. I don't know if you're like me, you watched the elections. This is some 2016 election results. And so even just the way that we share information, the map on the left, looks very red and not so much blue because it's by surface area. And then just changing that by population, it looks a little bit more even there. So sometimes you have to question, like, what is this visualization showing us? And then kind of dive in from there. All right, let's do another pulse check here, just to check in and see how you're doing. How are we now? Are we confused, overwhelmed, relaxed, engaged, excited, where we're at?
And Kate, while these results are coming in, I will share a question that came in over chat. And this just went to the panelists, but I thought that it'd be good for everyone to hear this question. So one person said, for some of my audiences, words are not the best. Thoughts to increase accessibility or create equity for audiences who do not read words. Yeah. Also, percentages are difficult for some to understand. So I shared that icons could be potentially good substitutes for words. And then sometimes instead of a percentage, you could give a ratio, like 7 out of 10 people. But I thought you could share some thoughts on that also.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that icons are really great. There's some ways that you can manipulate icons too to look like percentages, which is a little bit more advanced feature in Excel, but like you can have a icon of a person, and let's say you want to say like, like 7 out of 10 people, you can make the color only highlight that certain amount. So it's a little bit more advanced, but you can use icons with colors to then show some differences too, or like if you want to say 7 out of 10, you can have 10 different people and have 7 people in one color and then 3 people in a lighter color. So yeah, different icons are a great opportunity to help with folks who, may be visually impaired or unable to read. All right, I didn't see the results. I don't know if they popped up quickly for us, but was anybody on our confused? Oh, right, there it is again. Okay. All right, so most of us are relaxed and engaged and excited still. Awesome. So we're going to dive into our next section here, which is our live tutorial. So I'm going to just briefly step out of here and come into our Excel file, which you should have gotten another copy of today. If you want to just, I'll give you a moment to open that if you want to follow along, but if you don't want to follow along, you don't have to. So last webinar, we did some Excel for evaluation, and Catherine presented on pivot tables. And so we're going to start where she left off with the pivot tables. If you weren't here, watch the recording. The file that you were given today has the pivot table already made. So we're going to start from there. But yeah, if you don't know what pivot tables are, they're just a way to take information and take a spreadsheet and transform it into something a little bit more manageable, and really just take what the information that you're trying to look at. So this data set we have here, it's the senior living facility data. Here's our code book on the first tab. And then here's our data set. We have a pre-survey and a post-survey, and then the combined data. And then we made this pivot table last time, which was gender, account by gender, and then the average years that each gender lived at the senior living facility. And so we're going to take this pivot table information and we're going to make it into a chart. So how we do that is we're going to click in our pivot table here. And so if you remember, the 1 is male, 2 is female, 3 is transgender. We have our count by gender, and then the years that those folks have lived at the senior living facility in our pivot table. So I'm going to click in my pivot table, and then I'm going to go to...
Kate, just to interrupt you for a second, are you able to increase the font size at all?
Oh yeah, make this bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. I'm going to click on insert here at the top. And so if you're used to making charts in Excel, you probably click on some of these icons up here. But for making a pivot chart, we're going to click on this pivot chart button up here on the insert. So I'm just going to click on that now. And so when I think about what story I'm trying to tell with this data, let's say the story that we want to tell is what gender lives in the senior living facility the longest. And let's say we want to focus on the male population. So maybe someone has a question for us about what is the average years that males in the facility live there. So we would think, okay, so the story you want to tell is the years that males are living, is it more than other genders? And so we think, okay, we're comparing a couple of things. Let's use a column chart. So I clicked on pivot chart here, and then now I'm in the options to insert the chart. I'm going to say this column chart, and then I'm going to click OK. And so when you do that, you get all of the information in that pivot table. And for this, for pivot tables, one of the cool things too is that we have all these filters. And so in our last webinar, we talked about how we filtered out any missing data, which was those 999. So you can just even verify that within your chart. And so we're thinking, okay, so for this, we don't need the count of gender because we're really just looking at gender and then years. And so I'm going to remove that from our chart. We don't need it. So I'm going to click on this count of gender. I'm going to right click, and then I'm just going to say remove that field. So then it's just the information that I want to have here. And so now a little bit easier to see here. And because this is a chart and I want to label it a little bit easier, I think, having a 1, a 2, and a 3, it's great for a code book, but maybe not so much for a chart. So if you click right in your pivot table, you can change the label name. So I'm just going to say male, female, and then transgender. And so then that labels it a little bit better. All right, so looking at this now, there's a lot of buttons here, which are great if you want to, like I said, filter out some of this data. But for this chart, we're not going to really filter anything. So for your pivot charts, you can right click on anything and then just say hide all field buttons on the chart. And then that just makes it a little bit easier to see. And you can add them in again if you wanted to, but you don't need them for this chart. All right, so then I have this starting to look a little bit better now. Because I only have one value, I really don't need this legend here. So if you click in that, you can just delete that, and then it just makes it a little cleaner again. So, all right, looking at this now, the text is kind of this gray. It just makes it automatically this kind of lighter gray color. So I think black is best. So I'm just going to click on the whole chart, and I'm going to make this black. So then you see everything's a little bit darker. Because we are just looking at, our story that we're trying to tell is, do men live in the facility longer? I'm going to change my title so that it calls out the information that I want to share. So I'm going to click in my title, and I'm just going to title this, on average, men live in the facility for more years than other genders. So I'm calling out exactly what I want to call out. And this is a little big, so oops, I want all of this. Do that. So this is a little big for that, so I'm just going to make that a little smaller. And then I'm going to make my text down here a little bit bigger because this is kind of small. So I'm just going to make that a little bigger, easier to see. So looking at this is all right, but I think it might be a little bit easier if we add in some data labels. And so to do that, you can click in any of your columns. And if you right click on that, you can say add data labels. So I'm going to add my data labels. All right. I tend to like to put my data labels inside the column just because I feel like sometimes adding it above draws your eye up a little bit more. And so I like to just kind of keep it in there so then, your eye ends where the information ends. And so, I don't know, I don't know what just happened on my screen. There you go. Okay. So I'm going to click on my data labels and I'm going to right click in there and I'm going to say format data labels. And then I get this format data labels option. I'm going to close out my pivot chart here because I don't quite need it right now. All right, so now I have all of these different options that I can use to manipulate my data labels. And so like I said, I like to put mine on the inside end, but you can, if you want inside the base, outside end, in the center, wherever you want those, you can put those there. So, all right. If you were going to need to manipulate your label number in any way, so I say this is just a number, it changes it to 2 decimal places. I don't think I need 2 decimal places. I just still need the 1. If you just wanted to, you can change that. Let's say you don't want any, you can say none, and then it'll get rid of any of the decimals. So you could manipulate your data labels here, but let's just keep it at 1 for now. All right. So now that I have my data labels, I don't think I actually need to have my y-axis labeled. So I'm just going to click on that y-axis, and then I'm just going to delete that. Now I'm like, you know what? I don't think I actually need these grid lines either. They're just kind of taking up space and making it a little busier. So you can remove those grid lines by going to the design tab up here. And then this button, the add chart element. Here are just a ton of different ways that you can adjust your chart, change axes, titles, anything like that. But I'm going to go to this grid lines option and I'm going to deselect this primary major horizontal line. So then those grid lines just go away. The last thing I'll show you is, so for our story, we're looking at men. And so I think I want to call out this using a color. So I'm going to make all of these bars gray to start with. And then I want the male bar to jump out a little bit more. So if you click on any of the bars, it highlights all of them, but I'm just going to double click on the male bar and then it just highlights this one bar. And then you can change the color of that bar. So I'll do a dark blue. And then we see here, okay, it's great. The male bar is really popping out, but it's hard to read that data label now. And so if you click on all of the labels, again, just like with the column, it'll highlight all of them. And for right now, let's make that a little bigger just because it's kind of hard to see. So we made these data labels a little bigger. But then for this one, because it's on this dark blue, I'm going to use a white, but I don't want white on the rest of the data labels. So I'm just going to double click on the one text that I want white, and then it'll just highlight that one. So again, if I click on all of them and then I say white, it'll change all of them to white. We don't like that because it's hard to read these other on the gray now. So I'm just going to change this one to white. And it just changes that. So there we have our on average men live in the facility for more years than other genders graph. We see our male, female, transgender. We see that the male column is the one called out with the text. A few other things you may want to do with your chart is you can, if you're going to copy and paste it onto something, you might want to say not to have any fill inside of it. It automatically does this border. You may want to delete your border. So if you click on your chart and the chart area, you can border. It gets rid of that. So we just have our chart here. And you can adjust it. And the cool thing with pivot charts is that they are related to the pivot table that you make. And so any changes that you do to the pivot table are going to then change in the pivot chart. And so this is really great if you have data that you keep adding things to, and you want to have your charts change with the data that you add in. This will just automatically update it, or if it doesn't do it automatically, if you click on the data part, data tab, and you click refresh all, it'll refresh. So just a way to take your pivot table and then make your pivot chart. So any questions came in on this part?
We don't have any right now.
Okay. All right. We are going to go, oops, clicked on the wrong button. Go back to our slides here. So that was our live tutorial on our data. Some literature that we reviewed if you wanted to take a look at anything. And then, like we said, this is our last webinar for the time being. So we've had using technology to collect data, creating an evaluation plan, evaluation method, survey design, using Excel for evaluation, and then data visualization. And so we're just interested to know if there's any additional support you'd like from us in the future. Are you interested in more webinars? Are you interested in other supports? So anything you want, you can write in the chat box here of what you're interested in us from the future.
Additionally, we'd be happy to hear any feedback that you have for us. I know that you'll receive an evaluation from the CE department in the next couple of weeks, but certainly any feedback about your experience through the webinar series, we would love to hear that. We go through it, we comb over it as you would expect, and we want to have your voice included in the ways in which we put together our work plan for 2021. So please share any thoughts, any reactions or comments or feedback that you might have for us in the chat box.
We're getting a lot of requests for more webinars and positive feedback on the webinars that we've had, requests for more on data visualization and an intermediate version of the series, so kind of stepping up to the next level.
And if you have any questions or feedback now, I've saved a couple minutes at the end here for any questions that you might have.
And just as a reminder, someone did ask earlier if they could bring this webinar back to their colleagues, and we will have the recording and the slides available on our website in a few days. And we'll let everyone know once that happens.
Yeah.
It's not before the holiday break, it'll be soon thereafter.
Yeah.
Oh, here's one question. How do you move your table image to another document?
Oh, so you can just copy and paste it into another document, and then if you take your is this how you move your chart to a different thing, or the actual table?
The word was table, but maybe refer to both. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So you can move those throughout any of the Excel spreadsheet, the tabs. You can just copy and paste those, and then so even if you move a pivot chart off of your pivot table tab and then move it to like a dashboard or something, it'll still connect to that same table. So you can move it anywhere in your Excel spreadsheet, and then if you want to move it into a different document, that's where it gets a little trickier to connect those two, but you can just copy and paste it right in.
Yes, there's a clarification, giving an example of putting a chart in a Canva.
So I think if you just maybe you can make an image out of it. So like save your chart as an image, and then you can upload it into a Canva.
And then a couple other topics that have been mentioned on upcoming SPSS webinars. That's not something that we have covered yet, but good to hear there's interest there. And someone also asked if we've covered ways to work with community members and partners for participatory evaluation. That's also not something that we have covered yet. So we will note that there's interest there.
All right, well, there's no other questions or comments. You can have your 3 minutes back in your day, but we'll stay on until 1. If anybody has, if something's lingering, feel free to let us know. And if something comes up after the fact, you can always feel free to reach out to us. Our email is here, ssw.peg.team@umish. If you have any questions about receiving your CE, you want to email ssw.conted@umish. And then our past webinar recordings are available for you. So if you missed the one on how to make the pivot table and you want to kind of catch up there, feel free to look at that Excel for evaluation webinar, and then anything in the past as well. So yeah, that's all we have for you today. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate those who have stuck with us throughout our series. We really appreciate everyone for coming and being a repeat guest with us, and we hope to see you all in 2021.